Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Monday, August 17th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square Washington's state government reporter. And in today's episode, 3 months after filing a complaint with the Public Disclosure Commission against Let's Go Washington and Brandi Kruse, the commission is advancing that case to the next phase. The next phase, they say, is a formal investigation. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they anticipate any ultimate finding of wrongdoing, but the idea here is that they believe undivided podcaster Brandi Kruse and Let's Go Washington have sort of conspired, and that every time Brandi has talked about Let's Go Washington initiatives, it amounts to her advertising for Let's Go Washington. And so this is kind of a free speech case, pretty critical case, especially as we're coming up on the November election just around the corner. So exclusive reaction from Brandi Kruse, Let's Go Washington founder Brian Heywood as well. It has been nearly a decade since a family farm in Grant County near Moses Lake found itself in a fight over water rights with the Washington State Department of Ecology, literally almost 10 years. This fight is now going to the state Supreme Court. Pretty significant case. We have exclusive reaction from Ron and Robin Foti, this couple with the farm in the Moses Lake area or just outside of Moses Lake, and also their attorney with Pacific Legal Foundation, Allison Daniel, is going to weigh in on the importance of this case. Also, the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, is one of many groups to file an amicus brief in support of the Fotis in this fight with ecology. So more on that coming up in today's episode. And then finally, as we have been for months now tracking overdose deaths in King County, unfortunately, last week was pretty bad. The highest weekly number since we here at the Center Square began reporting the weekly numbers. The Discovery Institute weighs in on this epidemic with an article that's been put up by our Washington State Center Square editor, Andrew Paxton. So that's all coming up in today's episode. All right, 3 months after a Sammamish City Councilwoman filed a complaint with the Public Disclosure Commission, the PDC, directed at Let's Go Washington and Undivided podcaster host Brandi Kruse, PDC staff are moving that case ahead. It's really a formality. Nothing new happened in the case at all. You wouldn't know that by some of the reporting with the local TV stations that went down after the PDC held a hearing on the matter last week. Now, Sammamish Councilwoman Pam Stewart is the one who filed this complaint back on May 12th of this year. She did that in her capacity as a communications liaison with Washingtonians for Ethical Government, alleging that Brian Heywood, founder of Let's Go Washington, violated Washington's Fair Campaign Practices Act, the FBCA. She alleges that Pam Stewart alleges there have been 159 instances, at least, of political advertising by Brandi Kruse on behalf of Let's Go Washington in support of 2 of their ballot initiatives. The initiative that voters are going to be voting on this November to protect girls in sports and parental rights. Of course, we also have the initiative that's going to attempt to or ask voters if they want to repeal Washington's new income tax. But we're talking about these 2 initiatives in particular that Brandi is pretty passionate about and has spent quite a bit of time talking about on her show. Now, whether or not she has a First Amendment right to talk about those, or whether or not every time she talks about it, it amounts to campaigning for Let's Go Washington, that's kind of the crux of the matter. I caught up with Brandi Kruse on Saturday to get her take on all of this.
So it seems very clear that this was another round of strategic headlines pushed by the progressive cabal that is trying to sort of undermine my credibility, undermine Let's Go Washington's credibility, and the media just plays into it. You know, Cairo 7, Fox 13, they did these stories. They didn't ask me for comment. I just found out they didn't ask Let's Go Washington for comment. They did get comment from the people who filed the bogus complaint. So the media is really complicit in all of this. But I've said from the beginning, I have never taken a dime to support anything. I've never taken a dime or been offered any money, frankly, to support a political candidate, to support any of the initiatives. I don't need anybody to give me money to support what I believe is the women's rights issue of a generation. And so this is all based on nothing. You know, this complaint alleges that I've given like more than $1 million in free political advertising to Let's Go Washington. The argument they're essentially making is that my speech isn't free anymore, that because I advertise on my show, that now all my speech has a price to it. And so I can never again take a position, make an endorsement or anything without it having an assigned value. And so it's bogus. It'll never stand, but that's not the point. The point was getting the negative headlines and trying to ruin my credibility as I'm pushing to protect girls' sports and parental rights.
Now, I remind you that this Pam Stewart, this Sammamish City Councilwoman who filed the complaint back on May 12th, was accused of intimidating signature gatherers outside a Safeway store earlier this year. There was a guy and his brother out collecting voter signatures for Let's Go Washington's attempt to repeal the income tax. And there was a bit of an exchange with Ms. Stewart and these two gentlemen. Police ended up being called. So I want to share with you part of Brandi Kruse on her Undivided podcast conversation with one of these signature gatherers about their exchange with Ms. Stewart.
And so once the police left, she followed me around and me and my brother, and she was harassing us, essentially just, telling us we're not supposed to be here. We shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. And then she began to start following people in the parking lot around, like going out to them and telling them, hey, don't sign this. These guys they're not even from here. They're just being paid by billionaires. They don't care about us or this issue, and some people were basically just like, lady, screw off. I'm going to sign this, whether a couple of people signed because she said not to. It was pretty funny.
Wow. So did you feel like she hindered your ability to collect signatures?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. She blocked us and obstructed us from signature gathering. She more so my brother than me, because at one point she was just, completely talking over him, explaining the initiative to people. Gross misdemeanors is a serious offense, when it comes to obstructing the signature gathering process, because this is just democracy at its roots, right? It's our First Amendment right.
What was your reaction? That woman who was nasty towards you is a city council member in that town?
I was surprised. I thought that was honestly the craziest part about the whole day, was learning that she was an elected official, completely unprofessional. She doesn't have any business being an elected official, for sure.
Now, it does not appear at this point that any charges ended up ever being filed against Pam Stewart for that, what these signature gatherers called, harassment, interference with signature gathering. Again, no evidence that any charges were filed, but it did, that incident and several others where, people were being intimidated, harassed, at times even threatened. Signature gatherers were in other instances. You may recall that prompted the office of Attorney General Nick Brown to put out a warning to say you can't do that. They have a constitutional right to be out there collecting signatures, and you can't get in their way. You can't grab their petitions. You can't push over their tables. We've seen all of those things happen and more. Now, Heywood of Let's Go Washington kind of bemoaned the fact that when this stuff was reported on last week by Cairo Television and by Q13, they didn't make any attempt to reach out to Let's Go Washington or to Brandi Kruse to say, what gives? What do you make of this complaint? PDC held a hearing on it this week. What do you have to say for yourself? Are you guys in the wrong, or why do you think, you haven't done anything wrong? So Brian Heywood spoke with me about that last evening.
They're trying to say, well, Brandi Kruse can't have her own opinion. It must be paid. And so the complaint against us, they filed like 159 issues where they said somehow she'd given us something. We got questions from the PDC that said, have you ever paid Brandi Kruse? Our answer is no, we've never paid Brandi Kruse. Let's Go Washington's never paid her for anything. They said, have you ever paid anyone else that has paid Brandi Kruse? And the answer to that is no. And that question is really interesting to me, because I suspect the reason we're getting that question is because that's what the other side does. They pay people to do it. So why are they asking us? It had never occurred to me to do that. So it feels like they're sort of exposing how they doing that. That we've never gotten anything from her. We've never given anything from her, given anything to her. She's been out there doing this very much because there's things that she, from everything she tells us, really believes in it. And I guarantee you, it's not easy to get people to come out and support something if they don't believe in it. So it feels like it's sort of political intimidation.
Now, Peter Lavallee, who is the executive director at the PDC, sent this email to Let's Go Washington's attorney about the hearing they held last week and kind of where the case stands now. We'll put this up for you. After conducting a preliminary review and assessment of a complaint filed by Pam Stewart concerning Let's Go Washington, PDC staff opened a formal investigation and held an initial hearing on August 12th, 2026. And he cites some of the revised Code of Washington and the Washington Administrative Code. At the hearing, it was noted that the initial hearing is not an adjudicative proceeding and that this RCW provides PDC staff with additional tools to resolve complaints through the use of alternatives to full formal adjudication or referral to the AG's office. I'm encouraging you to work with staff on resolving this matter. Again, that was from Peter Lavallee, executive director at the PDC. So be open-ended. They don't have a time frame. I received some information today from another person in the office of the PDC that said really this was just going to the next phase. Have no timeline for how this will be resolved or if in fact there's some finding to this complaint, what that means. Could that be a fine? Could it just be an agreement with Brandi Kruse or Let's Go Washington? We don't think you should say and do this, or if you do, you need to report it. Who knows? But it's interesting timing, of course, because we have these highly contentious initiatives on the ballot this November. And Let's Go Washington and Brandi Kruse are both convinced that really this is just, politically motivated and meant to kind of, cast aspersions on their organization and on Kruse herself. So we'll follow this. If something more is to come, we'll let you know. And I am putting up an article at the Center Square Washington page for much more on this today. All right, now to a water fight in Grant County, a great big, very expensive water fight headed to the Supreme Court the 1st of October. It has been nearly a decade since this fight began between this Grant County farm, Foti Farms, and the Washington Department of Ecology. Now, this fight with Ron and Robin Foti centers around water use on their farmland near Moses Lake. And Ecology basically saying that the Fotis didn't have any right to water the crops. Now, most crops they grow, it's kind of a rolling hills. I think it's about 4,000 acres. They need ample water there delivered for irrigation. They only get about 8 inches of water every year in that part of the state. So obviously, if you're growing very, water intensive crops like potatoes and alfalfa hay, some other crops that they have farmed for many years, they need a lot of water. So it was January of 2017. So again, nearly 10 years ago, they applied, as they did every year, to transfer water rights. This was just sort of a process you had to go through each year, get permission to transfer water rights from one area to another. And apparently then February 14th of 2017, Ron Foti gets a call from the hydrologist basically saying, your deadline is tomorrow for all this to be done. You haven't complied and you can't use your water. Well, at that point, they got crops in the ground. And that's when the real fight began. And ultimately, this ended up being fines leveled against Foti Farms in excess of $618,000. But now the state Supreme Court is taking up the case. So I chatted last Friday with their attorney who's taken the case pro bono from Pacifica Legal Foundation. This is Allison Daniel.
So if they suspect a violation of the water rights or somebody is already violating the water rights, then they have to provide a way for a water user to come into compliance. It's a system called sequence of enforcement. The legislature determined that assistance is required first before penalties are imposed. So we are arguing that those are interconnected, these two issues, and Ecology violated both. made up this statutory or this deadline without going through proper rulemaking, and then foreclosed the compliance pathway that Ron could have accessed in order to obtain water rights to lawfully irrigate the property at issue.
Now, the Fotis really have been bankrupted by this decade-long fight. They used to farm Timothy hay, alfalfa, potatoes, and other crops, both for domestic and international markets, but they've really had to scale that all way back. As you can imagine, banks tend to shy away from loaning you any money for new equipment, or, that's how farming works for the most part. You have to take these loans out, and then, of course, then you can pay them back when the crop uh, you know, a harvest is done, and you're getting obviously compensated then for what you've produced. But it's been a difficult battle for them. So I caught up again last Friday, the same time I spoke with their attorney. I spoke to Ron and Robin Foti.
I think for us, it feels like justice. The DOE has so many, like a lot of different departments, unvoted on people who work there. We don't even know who the people were that came out to our property and so-called measured, looked at water, if they went to the right property. There's just so much in question. And these people who are bureaucrats who are not voted in, who are making decisions of power all over the United States, and especially in agriculture where we grow food that everybody eats, and deciding what will stand and what won't stand. So for us to be heard, for the Pacific Legal Foundation to take us on and feel that this is important, speaks to all water users, people who have water rights. It really says a lot, because more and more of this is happening, and people need to stand up and take notice. And I'm grateful for the Pacific Legal Foundation coming in and standing with us. I was grateful for our previous two attorneys. But this is really something for all people in this kind of situation. And that maybe now, Carlene, like you, actually asking us questions, and I really do appreciate it, maybe the right information will get out there. Because for so long, I would say for 9 years, we just took it. We were told not to say anything, don't get on the bad side of the government. Well, we kind of already are. If you're in a lawsuit, you already are. And we really can't lose anything else. I mean, we've had to sell everything. The legacy has been cut off of his family's generation. Yeah. So we feel grateful. I don't know how it will come out. I know our state. I have confidence in Pacific Legal, and I feel hopeful, but that's not where my hope is at.
Well, it feels good to have a big team, and we haven't let go of the other two lawyers. In fact, I just talked to Steve yesterday, and then the other lawyer, Tom, that took over the case, he's co-counsel. So really, we have a lot of faith in everybody we're working with. It feels like a big team finally, instead of just me, Tom, and my family alone. But I never realized that until Pacific Legal came in. It's like, wow, I'm really well supported. And then we got all these amicus briefs coming that support us also.
Now, the Fotis have lots of support for their case. There have been many, many amicus briefs filed with the state Supreme Court in advance of these arguments. Those are like front of the court briefs to kind of buoy the case for the plaintiffs here. And one of those has been filed by the National Federation of Independent Business. NFIB has gotten on board with the Fotis. They believe this is a hugely important case for small business, for small ag and farmers, like the Foti Farms case. And so this is Rob Smith with NFIB, one of their senior attorneys.
And Mr. Foti here is like a lot of our members. I mean, he is a member. A farmer who is seeking to do everything right. He is trying to use or obtain the water rights, available to him through the proper channels. I'm pretty sure in this instance, it was to grow potatoes on the land that he was leasing. And, you just had a government agency, which unfortunately we at NFIB see too often, just telling him no. not trying to help him, not trying to, work with him in accomplishing those goals. And the government agency, in this instance, ecology, just coming in and saying, no, you don't have these rights, even though there's a statute that says, we're supposed to help you. The legislature said, that we're supposed to provide assistance. We're just not. We're just going to tell you you have these rights. You don't have these rights, excuse me. And that's the end of what we're going to do for you. And just, for Mr. Foti and other small businesses, including farmers in Washington, I mean, that's just not how it's supposed to operate.
Now, according to a June 2017 news release from the Department of Ecology, which was emailed to me back in May when I first reported on this case, they believe the Fotis are in the wrong here. We'll put this up for you. The Washington Department of Ecology issued cease and desist orders requiring the landowners and the lessee to stop pumping groundwater. Ignoring the orders, they continued pumping water illegally for 3.5 more months to water 530 acres of crops. And they cite the Odessa aquifer, which has been rapidly declining since 1980. They say that groundwater has dropped more than 200 feet, forcing local farmers and homeowners to drill wells deeper to reach the diminishing water supply. So again, this case is going to the state Supreme Court. I'm going to be putting up an article on this at our Center Square Washington page. And before that, I hope to get an updated statement from the Department of Ecology, because when I received this prior statement from them, citing their release from 2017, they didn't know if the state Supreme Court was going to hear the case or not. So now that we kind of have some more attention and importance to this case to be considered in October, I want them to have an opportunity to provide further comment. So I will include that in my article at the Center Square Washington page. Now, King County continues to see record drug overdose deaths at an alarming rate. In fact, Washington state has one of the highest overdose rates per capita anywhere in the entire nation, despite all the money that we are spending. The most deaths in a single week since we started putting up our weekly tracker occurred last week between August 10th and August 14th. So over a 5-day period, there were 19 in just King County, 19 drug-related deaths. And data provided to us from the medical examiner says one of the victims was a 15-year-old girl, who lost her life to a drug overdose in our part of the state in King County last week. Most overdose since we started tracking back in May. We are putting this up as a weekly tracker, and this time we have some comments from the Discovery Institute's Center on Wealth and Property. One of their project coordinators and a research fellow at Discovery Institute is Marcia Michaels, and she spoke with my editor, Andrew Paxton.
Washington State has very permissive drug laws by design, and most of us saw that shift in our adult lifetime. So now, where we don't punish, or we don't have laws against having hard drugs and possessing drugs. We often don't enforce laws against the selling and trading of drugs. And so we get a predictable result, which is that this substance that for many people is a huge snare. If you talk to people who are in recovery, talk to many addicts, they don't want to be addicted to drugs. But we are comfort-loving creatures. We are pleasure-loving creatures. We have a hard time self-regulating. And so when you have good boundaries around your life, a loving family, a good social network, good laws, they're actually enforced. It really helps human beings live and thrive. Well, in Washington State, we have removed a lot of those barriers. For some, I think it's a false idea of compassion. That if we're just soft on people, they'll be able to choose to do right. For most of us, that's a really difficult thing to ask, that we just do right all the time with no nudging, no boundaries. And so Washington has made it a very fertile area for drugs, drug trade, so of course we have dealers selling and people using. So that's a huge problem. It's just permissive drug policies.
Now, keep in mind, just King County spent $50 million in 2025 for resources and services including low barrier medications for opioid use disorder, distribution of naloxone, their outreach teams. That was their 2025 year budget just for King County, $50 million. And again, that's not for programs that are forcing people to get off drugs and save their lives, but in providing things like clean needles, clean foil, naloxone, that no barrier housing where you can just use in the privacy of your home. Now, according, as I mentioned, to the Centers for Disease Control, Washington State ranks in the top of drug deaths per capita. So, like we were talking about last week during episodes of Washington in Focus Daily, the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, the LEAD program, which was started right here in Seattle, King County, is now under incredible scrutiny after Washington Policy Center and Eric Zimmerman came out with a report basically refuting all of the success data points that LEAD has been citing. And on the federal level, has gone to Congress and said, hey, look at the numbers. The recidivism's down. People, some of them get jobs. This is working to great success. Well, that apparently is not the case. And so here we have the evidence of, 15-year-old girl among the many deaths, 19 of them in King County just last week due to drug overdose. And my editor, Andrew Paxton, has put up a lengthy article on the Center Square Washington page today. I encourage you to check that out. And a quick tease for tomorrow. I'm not going to give you too much information, but Andrea Swart, this all relates. Andrea Suarez of We Heart Seattle, the ones that are out there picking up the used needles and the foil and the human feces in our parks and our streets in Seattle. She's now under investigation from Labor and Industries. And get this, it's for alleged improper handling and disposal of the drug needles and the used foil and the human feces. Now, mind you, King County Public Health hands out these clean drug use kits to users. Here's a clean needle, here's some foil, here's some naloxone, here's a tourniquet. Literally, these are the things that King County Public Health with taxpayer money is putting out. Andrea goes out there with her team and cleans these things up, and now they're coming after her. A lot more on this because she's got a plan to kind of turn this back around on them. We'll share that in tomorrow's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. I'm excited to share that story. So thanks for watching on this Monday, August the 17th. I hope you enjoy the sunshine. It's another beautiful day out there. Hope to see you again on Tuesday.